I'm Daniel. My project is on adaptive limb-based combat in Unreal Engine 5, exploring how precision targeting and enemy AI can be used to create dynamic encounters. My project's aim was to develop a physics-based combat system where individual limbs of an enemy can be attacked and dismembered. Depending on the sustained injuries, enemies behave differently, switching to a different weapon if an arm is lost, for instance. Procedural animations were used to visualize these differences, i.e., the walking animation changing to a limping one if a leg has been shot off, and a different idle animation after switching from a two-handed sword to a one-handed dagger. Defensive Boolean variables were used in blueprint logic. Money taken when individual limbs have had their health bar depleted, but also a few other conditions. Some of them involved the legs, as I needed to know if one was gone, regardless if it was the left or right leg, or both. All of them were key in spreading the dummy's health across all limbs. My motivation for undertaking this project was that I love games where physics come into play. The comedy of Goat Simulator, the feeling of being powerful and super hot, breakable objects in teardown and turbo dismount, among others. Across different titles, physics make for unpredictable gameplay, and I believe this trait can be applied to combat. However, set combat should be more realistic and complex than simple health bars, hence my idea of making it more emergent through enemy AI. My idea has some potential applications in industries not directly related to games. For instance, a limb targeting mechanic could help with making educational tools and medical training simulations. This could take the form of serious games that allow for UI-based interactions, meaning users engage with a human anatomy as a physical system and special entity. Selecting a knee joint could prompt periods of text which explains how ligaments work. The use of physics, meanwhile, is tied to mathematical models that simulate injuries in real-world scenarios, by combining finite element and multi-body systems to reproduce collisions. But the need to render tissue and bone structure makes them performance-intensive and unsuitable for real-time interactions. Hence, a game engine could be used for this purpose. The trade-off being that some anatomical precision may be sacrificed for interactivity and real-time performance, characteristics that matter in a training context as it makes the technology more accessible. Both these applications could be combined in a simulation where a medical student can select limbs, view muscle and bone structure, then apply a force to simulate a fracture to understand what breaks during the injury and how to treat it. With enough tweaks, a surgery simulator style game could look like this. And of course, there are several ways to apply my idea to games, whether increasing immersion in simulations or developing combat systems where strategic thinking is required. A player may choose to only target certain limbs to disable enemies without killing them, thus counting as a pacifist run. Non-lethal combat is not a concept I originally had in mind, although in hindsight I feel like it would fit well within a morality system which alters future encounters depending on how often enemies are spared. Doing so rarely will make combat tougher since enemies realize how deadly the player is, and vice versa for sparing them as much as possible. To keep it simple, a death is only counted if the head or heart is hit. There's also the potential for the use of AI to allow for realistic reactions to limb damage, such as attempting to seek medical treatment, especially if targeting the legs. This includes facial animations, although that was beyond my project scope. To implement limb detection, two methods were considered. One is hitbox-based, while the other is the per-bone collision. A hitbox-based approach was rolled out quickly when testing if shear collisions could be a viable option to give separate limbs their own hitbox. It went unused due to lack of precision, although it may have had a lower performance cost. In any case, making the limb detection was much easier with a per-bone system, and with Unreal Engine's third-person game template, it was simple enough to add a damage system to give individual limbs their own health bars. This approach more closely aligns with the project's goals because the integration of the dummy skeletal mesh means high accuracy despite the possibility of higher performance requirements. Per-bone collision also provides scalability for more mechanics to be added. These may include armored limbs that take less damage, a feature that could be linked to AI, and designed to protect limbs that are often targeted. This is similar to AI in games like Hello Neighbor, which learn from player habits and does feel more human. Both ways have their own uses though. Hitbox systems may be used in the context of arcade games, ones which use low-poly, blocky enemy models where box collisions fit neatly, while per-bone collision is better when using human-like meshes for simulator games and emergent systems like one I've made. For limb dismemberment, there were two notable caveats to the implementation. First off, I wasn't able to work out how to have multiple limbs gone at the same time using the setup shown in the tutorial I followed. I feel the workaround to this issue may involve adding each dismembered limb to an array which keeps track of them. As such, I resorted to highlighting the bones that correspond to the missing limbs. The second caveat is that the tutorial shows how to make fake limbs using basic shapes, frozen cylinders, which give them a rough look. As such, I took the initiative to use 3ds Max and show the meshes for the fake limbs look like the real ones. 3ds Max was a suitable tool for the task at hand, although there were some issues when importing limbs as meshes in terms of positioning. My idea had two major challenges. For one, other games already have limb damage systems, such as Fallout and Borderlands, where they apply predefined penalties such as reduced move speed and movement accuracy, resulting in static behavior. Thus, I saw an opportunity to make the mechanic feel emergent and shift from scripted to adaptive gameplay, alter not just the numbers when the limit is dismembered, but also enable behaviors. The extent to which this has been achieved is arguably limited. In addition, I found it tricky to integrate behavior trees to make enemies adapt to changing circumstances, fleeing, seeking cover, switching weapons, etc. So there was a valuable opportunity to improve my skills in that department. I also needed to add a procedural animation to complement this, something which involves state trees and thus enhance my experience using animation blueprints. Several games were used as references. Out of all the ones considered, 4 of them stand out. Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance has Blade Mode, an ability that lets the player slow down time and aim at specific targets on an enemy, the foundation of my project. Likewise, the 2016 Ratchet & Clank game has a Plasma Striker, a weapon which encourages precise aiming by giving enemies weak points. Attacking them deals extra damage. In Happy Room, there's a display which shows how much health each of the enemy's limbs have. They change color depending on if health is high, medium, or fully depleted. And Red Dead Revolver, aside from precise aiming, features ragdoll physics. But those weren't the only games that influenced me. Later in development, I was taught an FPS called Fear, and made some insightful notes about the AI used in the game when doing some research. One source from games will reveal some traits of the enemies in Fear. They may flip over tables and knock down shelves to create cover, go for reinforcements when threatened, or when use stairs and ladders, jump over chasms, etc. Fear avoids scripted gameplay or defining intelligence by the strength or number of foes. Scripting is about programming events to happen in a certain order, so developing from this leads to a unique dynamic experience, and opponents direct intelligently to the environment and the players. My project borrows some aspects of Fear's AI, namely flipping over tables to use cover and climbing ladders only if both arms are intact. And here is the proof of concept showing my idea working in action. So the first thing that's shown is the limb highlighting. It's actually finalized quite late. And then the limb dismemberment, first off shown the heads, is a one-hit kill, as is the case with other FPS games. Then both the arms being shot off, you shot off the weapon switch from the sword to the dagger. And next is the legs. Shooting one leg changes the dummy to be limping. Shooting both makes it go to ragdoll, so it cannot move anymore. Then the heart is a target that is one hit kill as well. It was added quite late due to research. Then the weapon switch from the other arm into the right arm. And finally, when shooting limbs, especially their legs, the dummy has a chance to either climb a ladder, as long as it has both arms, as you can see right here, or will take cover. And I actually added another type of cover later, which is a table, and it will, if there's a table, it will flip the table over as cover and crouch under it. And either scenario can happen even if the dummy has both arms, to give it a chance of randomness. This was the agile roadmap I followed. However, it changed over time due to some tasks being scrapped and others taking longer than expected. For instance, the limb targeting system took a while, while the limb dismemberment was simple thanks to a very helpful tutorial. Weak points were not included as they were deemed non-essential to the project, although I do realize this will not be the case in the context of a full-length game. As swapping out default models for one sake for maximum was also scrapped, although I did manage to add some VFX and audio for a bit of juice. As a result, I learned that managing scope is a crucial part of development, especially when setting ambitious goals within a relatively small time frame. I also proved the importance of the Kanban methodology. Core mechanics must be prioritized over cosmetic features to ensure the project is finished on time. By the end of this project, I have honed several skills. Blueprint scripting for the core logic behind limb targeting and health, physics simulation and ragdoll systems for making realistic physical interactions, combat design and AI behavior to give limbs movement actual gameplay consequences, and procedural animation, so enemies adapt depending on what limbs are still functional. As such, I will be best suited to apply for gameplay programmer, combat designer, and even technical animator roles. To conclude this presentation, I believe my project successfully demonstrates adaptive limb-based combat in Unreal Engine 5, which combines physics, AI, and procedural animation, opening up a wide range of possible encounters. Given more time, I would have expanded on the unique behaviors brought about by damaging limbs and ensured there's an element of chance to keep things somewhat unpredictable. Some features that could have been added are a crawling animation when both legs are gone, a climbing animation when using the ladder, and overall more actions than when enemies take damage, including communicating with allies. However, that last one will require making the setup compatible with multiple enemy instances, which proved to be too difficult for my initial set.